Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome everybody here to the Lakers Lounge podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, joined on this fine Wednesday evening by my buddy who covers a team about as well as anybody covers a team. In this case, it's the Portland Trailblazers. It's Sean Highkin. He runs the Rose Garden Report and does tremendous work there. Sean, thank you very much for hopping on. How you holding up?
It's been an interesting week for me. Not just the DA thing, which obviously this is a Lakers show. That's kind of what you're bringing me on to talk about. But it's been a pretty chaotic week on my end because it starts with the Anthony Simons Drew Holiday trade, which maybe we'll get into. But the bigger thing that happened was the drafting Jan Hansen with the 16th overall pick, which A, was completely out of nowhere. So it's a big story on that front. But B, the Blazers might now become the official team of China. And so my life might change dramatically going forward. So yeah, it's been an interesting 10 days or so. But certainly the DA thing is also a big part of it. And it's a big part of, how the roster of the team I cover has been reshaped. And it sounds like, I don't know if anything's official yet, but it sounds like things are heading in the direction that he's probably going to end up on the Lakers.
Yeah, Chris Haynes, who I think deserves the credit on this from the get-go, right when it was announced that or reported that that Ayton was going to be bought out, Haynes, I don't think he tweeted it, but he said it on the live show that he was on. He's going to the Lakers. And then somebody asked him, well, what about Milwaukee? And he was like, no. So I Haynes deserves, I think, a lot of credit for this story. He probably won't get it from a couple of platforms, but I think he deserves a lot of the credit there.
Somebody in the chat saying he just reported.
What's that?
Somebody in the chat, I see the chat on my screen. Somebody in the chat is saying Haynes just reported. So we should probably go to his
yeah, I have it up here right now. He just tweeted out a really funny looking, a really sad looking Deandre Ayton in his picture there. I feel like Deandre Ayton isn't that sad over this.
He's usually a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I don't know if I
see if you pull up maybe I'll grab the image that he sent out and put it up here on the screen so that y'all can see.
I don't know. The different, well, not just him, but like all the different news breakers, some of the breaking news graphics that they put up, like it's interesting to see like the difference in font choices and the photo choices and like how good the jersey swaps are. And it's like its own industry. And your outlet Clutch Points is like the pioneer of it. And I still think nobody does it better than they do.
Yeah, well, they've kind of shifted more into like AI stuff. I miss like the really goofy stuff that I guess we used to do. But
their run during COVID was like generational. Like I still like half the photos I have saved on my phone are just like different random like
things on it.
Like Clutch Points graphics, like of
white blood cells.
Right, or like I remember when it was like when it was first like Rudy Gobert test positive for COVID, they just like put one of him with like a bunch of like virus particles, like bacteria particles floating, and the caption is just "Oh no," or "Yikes," or like
yeah.
I actually like. There was one time I somehow still to this day, it's been 5 years or whatever since the pandemic started. I'm probably the only person I know that has never had COVID, as far as I know. I have somehow managed to never get it, and I'm like. I got the vaccine and I got my shots and stuff, but I'm out here. I'm in the locker room. I'm in locker rooms. I'm in NBA arenas with 20,000 people. I've somehow never had it, but early on in like January of 21, so like a little bit before the vaccine came out, I thought I had it. I ended up testing and I was negative, but like I got sick and I thought I had it. And I actually hit up our mutual friend, Jason Pat, who's like the editorial director at Clutch Points, a buddy of mine from when I lived in Chicago. And I was like, hey man, I'm waiting on my COVID results to come in. If I do have COVID, can you make me a graphic with the virus particles that says COVID plus on it with a picture of me on it? and I would have like tweeted that out as a way of like saying I had COVID. Didn't end up needing it, but I thought about it.
Yeah. No, that'd have been. I was just. I'm sorry. Shams just tweeted it out.
Oh, he just broke the news. Awesome.
Shams tweeted it out, and he threw me off because Deandre. So here's what he writes: Deandre agreed to sign with the Los Angeles Lakers. Sources tell ESPN between Portland and LA, Ayton will earn $34 million next year. And I was like, all I read was the $34 million.
You forgot the most important part. Agents Naima Nakamian of Innovate Sports and Bill Duffy of WME Sports reached the deal with Lakers president Rob Pelinka. You have to put that in there. Everybody needs to know that part.
I was like, wait. 34. I thought maybe it was like a 3-year deal, because what I've been hearing is that it's going to be a 1-and-1. First year is going to be for the remainder of the mid-level money that the Lakers have at their disposal, which is like about 8.3 million or so. And then, like I said, it'll be the second year will be on his terms, depending on how this first year goes.
Okay.
And
that's phenomenal. The between Blazers and because
that's why I was like, hold on.
No, that's
34?
So good. That's how you. No,
did we just wave and stretch LeBron?
No, that's awesome because he gave his salary with the Blazers for the last year of his deal was 35.
Yeah, it was 35.
He gave back 10, which was enough for them to be enough under the tax that if they so choose, they can use the full mid-level without going into the tax. I don't think they're going to at this point because there's not really a whole lot of stuff left out on the free agent market. But if they wanted to, they could use the full mid-level without going into the tax. He gave that much back. And I just figured, okay, he has, he gave enough back for them to do that and kind of clean up their books a little bit. But if he gave back that much, that must mean he probably has some good idea that he'll be able to get that much money. So yeah, I guess that's just how it ended up.
Well, actually, I think that's an interesting kind of scab to pick at here a little bit, in that Deandre Ayton wasn't in the Lakers' plans at all heading into this offseason. At all. Like, there was some wondering out there, like, would they try to trade for Ayton? Would they try to get Portland to take on Vando's contract and try to trade for Ayton there? Obviously, he winds up getting bought out, but the only Blazer, maybe we could talk about this over the course of the show. The only Blazer who the Lakers have had any kind of real substantive conversations with Portland about has actually been Robert Williams from what I've heard. Yeah. And but yeah, Ayton gets bought out, and going into the summer, the belief with the Lakers was that they were going to keep Dorian Finney-Smith. They would sign a Brook Lopez type to the taxpayer mid-level exception. Obviously, he signed for more.
Right.
And then make whatever additions or subtractions to the team from there. Then the talks with Dorian Finney-Smith, which I've talked about here on the show plenty, but they go really poorly. He is not a Laker, obviously, anymore. And from there, they were still kind of focused on Brook Lopez, but Brook Lopez eventually got $9 million from the Clippers, and the Lakers thought that was a little rich for their blood, because they wanted to, they really liked LaRavia. Once it looked like they were going to have access to the full mid-level exception, they really liked LaRavia, so that they were even after he became available, or even after it started circulating that Ayton could be available, Ayton wasn't really in their plans. And it's been really interesting to see how many teams viewed him that way. The Pacers were like, yeah, we could stick it to the Lakers, but, and the Golden State Warriors are more interested in a 73-year-old Al Horford, like there are all these, other teams that had need there. Everybody has a need at center nowadays, given the way that these rosters are being built out. And there's Ayton, this former number 1 overall pick, who has had a productive career to this point, statistically. Played in the finals, no major injuries or controversies or criminal activity, nothing like that. He's just a little lazy, a little goofy, and he finds himself looking at this market that was pretty desolate. So I think that's a great way to kind of segue into what we were going to talk about here in the first place, which is this kind of painting of Ayton and the way that it's been put out there as not the most not just lazy, not just not the best, the work ethic isn't necessarily there, but actually disruptive. And I feel like that's where things have taken a turn. Like they've kind of crossed the line in that regard, based on the stuff that I was hearing, not just since he was on the Lakers radar after he was bought out, but over the course of the year. I never heard anything about him being like a bad presence in the Blazers locker room.
No, because I don't think he was. I mean, look, he's got his flaws, and he's got his days where he's kind of moody and whatever. He's not a bad guy. In fact, he's actually a really good guy. He's like kind of a funny, goofy, he keeps the mood light.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, you can feel however you want to feel about, maybe he should take everything a little bit more seriously. There are some times where maybe that's not the mood that people need to have, but you saw there was a report out there that was painted him in a pretty negative light that one of the like aggregator accounts reposted.
Yeah.
And Tumani Kamara commented on this post and said, people will just believe anything. And then if you look at like, if you look at like, some of the other players on Instagram, like Scoot Henderson posted like a thing about how much he's going to miss him. And like Donovan Clingan reposted the Blazers, thank you, DeAndre Ayton graphics. So he's a good dude, and he's well liked by teammates. So this idea that he's this like malcontent or he's this locker room cancer or whatever, I don't think that's accurate at all. Now, with that said, I can absolutely understand why the reputation is there to the degree that it is. Because if you kind of just look through his entire career, so it started out like he was the number 1 overall pick, and it was certainly defensible at the time. But when you look at the career that he's had and the career that Luka has had, and Luka was drafted 3rd overall, he's always going to be the guy that got drafted ahead of Luka. So there's that part of it. There's the part where during the pre-draft interview process, and this has definitely been made public, like this is definitely out there, but he said that like, during that process that he said that like his goal in the NBA
his goal was the second contract,
was to get to the second contract, which he did. He got a max offer sheet from the Pacers, which Phoenix matched. And then there's just, the way things ended in Phoenix. And I think, I mean, look, he absolutely did kind of quit and check out in that series against Dallas, which, it's not a defensible thing. Yeah. But you also have to kind of look at all the circumstances that led to that, because he said, that was the year that the Suns were I think they were the 1 seed. They had the best record in the West, and then they got absolutely destroyed by the Warriors. Might have had a better record, but like, the Phoenix was really dominant in the regular season that year. They were kind of like this year's Cavs of that year.
Yeah.
And it was coming off their finals appearance against the Bucks in 21. And in that early, in that 21 season, when they got, they made the finals, before that, they basically, DA was not really like a featured offensive player in that series.
Yeah, he's a little things guy.
Because they had Chris Paul, they had Devin Booker, they had other guys. And they basically said to him, hey, if you sacrifice, if you just be a defensive guy, you do the little things, clean up lobs, clean up rebounds, whatever, do what you need to do to help us, make this title run. And then we'll take care of you as far as like your extension that summer. And he did that. He held up his end of the bargain. Like, for whatever people want to say about his flaws as a player, he was the starting center and the defensive anchor on a team that made the finals. And then he did everything he was asked. And then they didn't give him the extension that he wanted. They didn't want to pay him. So then you go into that season already with kind of some bad blood. Remember, there was that, going into the 22-23 season, there was that thing where he said that like him and Monty Williams still haven't talked since the.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. So like there was already kind of some bad blood there.
But I don't blame him. He held up his end of the bargain.
He did everything he was asked to do, and was kind of told, look, if you do this, we'll pay you. And then he didn't get paid. I mean, I'm not saying it was like right that he, basically quit on the team in that game 7 against Dallas, but I also not going to say I don't in some way understand why he might have the reaction that he had to it. And then the other part of it is, if you look at the way that things went in Detroit the year that Monty Williams was there, and kind of Jaden Ivey getting the same treatment as DA did in Phoenix, it makes me a little bit more inclined to think maybe it wasn't entirely a DA thing as much as maybe
That's a great point.
like other like if Monty's one of those guys, obviously like a really respected guy, respected coach, whatever. He's also one of those guys that if he decides he doesn't like you, you're just done. You're just out, and you're completely in the doghouse. And I can understand why Deandre Ayton would be somebody like Monty Williams and Chris Paul would not like, because again, he's not a bad guy. He's a good guy, but he's not somebody that is like militantly like only about basketball and is just going to, be locked in at all times. And it's ironic. Like you and I were texting about this earlier before we decided to do this live, but it's kind of unfortunate that they never actually got to play together, because Dame would have been the exact perfect guy to have with somebody like DeAndre Ayton. If you look at like the way that Yusuf Nurkic's career kind of turned around after he got to Portland, and Dame really like poured into him and got him to kind of buy in after the way things went in Denver. Dame even like was able to get to Hassan Whiteside a little bit, and he was pretty productive the year that he was in Portland. I think somebody like DeAndre Ayton would have been phenomenal with Dame, and it's just kind of ironic that like they were traded for each other and they never actually got to play together. But that's more the type of, when you're talking about like somewhere that would be like a good structure or a good veteran presence for somebody like DeAndre Ayton to have. Chris Paul, being as much of like a militant guy as he is maybe less of the type of thing that works for somebody like DA than somebody like Dame would, which is why I'm really curious to see how it goes with JJ Redick in
LA. We'll have to talk about that. We'll talk about that in a second. I want to go back to like the path that got us here, because I've always believed in incentivizing stuff, and people will do the right thing if they have the right reason to do it. It can be kind of a cynical view on stuff, but still, that's kind of how the world works. And with Ayton, I'll go to my grave feeling this way, that I feel like his career would just go very differently had they just given him the extension that they told him how to earn. He did that stuff. They make a finals, and they're just like, And not saying that maybe there was some other stuff going on there that, would indicate to them that maybe he wasn't the right guy to give that kind of, because there is some immaturity stuff.
Absolutely.
There, right?
No, absolutely. So, if the team decides DeAndre Ayton is not who they want to give a max contract, even if it's the rookie max, it's not like the super max. That's absolutely defensible to not want to give him that money. Here's another what if, and I have to give credit to Caitlin Cooper, who does a great job covering the Pacers about this.
Oh,
if
Halliburton
the Pacers
theory.
had actually gotten him when they signed him to the offer sheet, maybe his career goes differently, because when you're playing with somebody like Tyrese Halliburton, like maybe people think about him differently than they think about him now, where he's kind of viewed as like an empty stats guy that doesn't really care about basketball that much and is just sort of more trouble than he's worth, which I think some of that stuff that's been out there about him is fair. Some of it is not. It's certainly not to the degree that a lot of it has been out there the last couple of days since the buyout happened. But in a vacuum, I understand why the Suns maybe had reservations about giving him that money, but it's also just kind of a bad look to tell him that, you do this for us and then we'll take care of you. And then he holds up his end of the bargain and you don't hold up your end of the bargain.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing, when you're really young, it's going to make you cynical. It's going to make you prioritize some other stuff, not necessarily winning. And I don't know. There's a lot to like about his game. And there's plenty of reason that, for Lakers fans who are really excited right now, I know that it's kind of, the anytime people see Lakers fans happy, that's not a thing that can last. I get it. But like, with those Lakers fans who are excited about this guy, again, there's a lot to like. He's got a nice looking jumper, still fairly athletic. There are some, kind of bumps and bruises on the model at this point, but still like, not a ton of tread on his tires either, because he has missed some time over the course of the last few seasons. I don't know how much of the time missed was not to use the T word, but, how much of it would you say while he was in Portland was kind of, I don't think he's such a good player that he impacts winning, that he would have to be benched. But, were there some moments, would you say, that it was like, yeah, he might have been able to go, but he didn't?
I think if they really needed him for a playoff run with the calf, but first of all, I mean, it is a calf injury, so that as we've now obviously seen many times, we saw it 3 different times during the playoffs where like that's not something you want to play around with. But I'll put it this way: there are guys in the NBA that, and this is absolute. I mean, I don't think I'm going to be breaking any news here. This is certainly not an indictment on DA as a person, because I like DA a lot as a guy. I think he's a really good dude. I'm actually going to kind of miss having him in the locker room as somebody that covers the team. But there are some guys that if it's a 50-50 shot, they will do everything they can to play. And there are some guys that if it's a 50-50 shot, they might be more inclined to be like, I'm all right. Like Dame was kind of one way where like when Dame was here in Portland still, he would always try to come back early from stuff to the point that like the team had to tell the equipment manager, don't even put his jersey in his locker, to give him the idea that it's possible that he could come back. There are some guys that are wired like that are, like Dame is like that. Giannis is like that. We all know there are guys that are like that. Deandre Ayton is more like, if you tell him, hey, we want to hold you out with this calf injury, he might just be like, all right, cool. Which again, that does not make him a bad guy.
Yeah,
it just is what it is.
No, I could just totally. I've only ever like been on the outskirts of a scrum when he was in like summer league, so I've never actually interacted with the guy, but like okay.
He's a really funny dude. And actually like probably one of the most memorable locker rooms of this season. And it's actually appropriate that we're talking about this on a Lakers podcast, because the night that the Luka trade happened, the Blazers, this was during their stretch where they won 10 out of 11 games right before the All-Star break, and people started to think like the team might actually be good. That night they were playing the Suns, and they were blowing the Suns out. They were up like 20 with 5 minutes to go.
Yeah.
Budenholzer pulls his starters. And then, so, those of us, I'm sitting next to Meringue, and we're just like not really paying that much attention to the game at that point, because it's like garbage time. We get the Shams alert that Luka got traded to the Lakers, and we look at each other, and we're just like, oh, Shams got hacked. We didn't even like give it a second thought that like it could possibly be. We were just like,
talk to Lakers people.
We were all
like,
just,
they were like, wait, what? We did
like,
what?
oh yeah, that's a good joke. If I hacked Shams's phone, I would probably also say that Luka got traded to the Lakers. That's a good bit. And then we kind of realize that it's real, and everybody in the arena reacts the way that everybody reacts to it. But then we go into the locker room after the game, and like the players are kind of still processing it. And DA is just so worked up. He's like, I'm not going to try to do an impersonation of him, but he's like, bro, the Lakers got Luka, man. This is crazy. And then he was like telling us the whole story. The language that he used was a little bit more colorful than I really want to say on here, but he was telling the story of like the night that the Suns traded for Kevin Durant, and he was like, him and like his teammates were like on the road. They were just like hanging out at the hotel or like playing cards or something, and like Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson like abruptly got calls that they were getting traded, and they started, and everybody was like, yo, what is this? This is crazy. But he was just like the way he was, that's the thing about him, is that like there are some days where he comes in and he's like not in a great mood, and he just like is kind of standoffish and doesn't want to talk to anybody. Like he does have those days, which is some of this stuff that's been reported maybe to more of a degree than it actually is. But when he's in a good mood, he's like super funny, super gregarious, super like outgoing. And, he's one thing. And this is also just like, I'm just going to like say this because I know that you guys, as Laker fans, now that he's going to be on the team, you guys, want to have as much information about the guy as possible. One thing that I actually really respect about him, and I said this on Twitter the night that it got, that the buyout happened. So he gets traded here as part of the Dame trade. He's the starting center. He's making a ton of money. He was like one of the marquee guys that came back in the Dame trade. In his mind, the Blazers are building around him for the future, or he's like going to be part of the long-term future.
Yeah.
last summer they draft Donovan Clingan with the 7th overall pick. So you totally could have imagined, especially given, the way he reacted to not getting the extension in Phoenix, whatever. You could totally see a scenario where DA is like, oh, screw this. They drafted my replacement. I'm going to just check out.
The Aaron Rodgers thing.
Right, exactly. Complete opposite. He, from day one, bought in. He was like this. He was like welcoming to Clingan. Whenever we asked him about him, he was always talking about like how great he was and like how much of a good learner he was and how he thinks he's going to be dominant and all this stuff. Their lockers were next to each other, and so they had a good relation. He was like kind of his vet, which, for a lot of reasons, I don't know if Deandre Ayton is somebody you want to be your vet, but he was willing to do that. And he never like looked at Clingan as like, oh, this guy's trying to take my spot, I'm going to cut him out. He was like the opposite. He was willing, he was always like talking to him on the bench. Even like there was stuff that like DA, like you'll see him when they do like the tunnel fit walks. Now that if you're like looking through that stuff, he is probably the most like iced out NBA player but he's like probably first team all ice.
Yeah.
And so he's like, he let me hold one of his chains once and it literally weighed like 10 pounds. Probably easily cost like $300K. But like Donovan Clingan has this little diamond chain that says DC on it. And the first time he walks in wearing it into the locker room, DA's like, bro, that's hard. That's hard. Like, so even like from that stuff, he like him and Clingan had like a good thing going. And so I think it speaks well to DA that the Blazers drafted somebody that plays his position in the top 10. And he didn't take that as like, oh, they don't want me or they're trying to phase me out. Now, obviously this time, when they drafted a center in the first round for the second year in a row, at that point, that might've been why, DA's people went to the Blazers and said, look, it's clear that like, this is what it is, and he's not being prioritized. Can we maybe figure something out? And then that's also maybe why he was able to give back as much money as he did, or was willing to. That they kind of came up with a resolution that works for both sides.
Yeah. I think I remember you tweeting out that was the exact amount that they needed for him to take
use the full mid level.
Right? Yeah. So, I want to talk about him, the basketball player, really quickly, and what does he still have left in the tank? I went and watched some of his stuff over the last couple of days or so. And I don't think he's as springy as he was obviously in Phoenix. But I still think there's a lot to like. What did you think of Deandre Ayton, the basketball player, and what he still has going for him?
Depends on the night. Like he's a guy. I mean, it's just like with his personality. When he's locked in, he's terrific.
Yeah. I think he had 25 and 20 for you guys this season, right?
Yeah, he did. There was and there was a game in Miami that was like probably the most defensively locked. Like he has if he was one of these guys, I said this, and the Andrew Bynum comparison has kind of come up, but if DA lived, breathed, and eat, if he was like one of these guys that's just like basketball 24/7, he would be a Hall of Famer because he's that talented.
Yeah.
And, we know he's like one of the best mid-range shooting bigs in the league. He has the ability to be a great defender when he's locked in. It's just, what are you going to get from him on a night-to-night basis is kind of the, why we're kind of here with, him getting bought out from the last year of his contract. It's like he can be an impact player when he's on, you get him on a good night, but it's going to be, and in fact, I'm actually really interested to see how the fan reaction is to the Deandre Ayton experience, because there are going to be nights where he looks like the most dominant big man in the league, and then there's going to be other nights where he'll have like 4 points and 2 rebounds against Charlotte or something, and the people in like the Lakers Twitter Spaces post game are like calling for him to be exiled from the league.
Yeah. I mean, AD oddly has a little of that to him too. And obviously, Lakers fans had a lot higher expectations for him. The nice thing I think here for Ayton is that he's coming in. It didn't cost the Lakers anything but money.
Right.
He's coming in at a position where they literally did not have an NBA caliber center last year. So the bar is low for him. From what I've heard, they're still working to go out and get potentially another center who they consider more regularly starting caliber. So we'll see, how maybe he handles more of a positional competition. I don't know, but I I've been thinking about this because you had mentioned, sometimes, how he kind of reacts to the situation around him.
Mm-hmm.
And Lakers fans can be really tough.
Yeah.
Like my mentions the last
There's just a
couple of
lot of
days, I'm not even a player. In my mentions the last couple of days, because I first mentioned the DFS ankle thing that Rob was trying to pull.
Mm-hmm.
My mentions the last 48 hours have been just complete chaos and a tire fire. And I didn't miss some like game-winning shot. The Lakers fans can be really, really hard on players. But I think here in this case, not to say that they're going to like, treat him with kid gloves or anything like that. But I think it's as close to a blank slate as a player can arrive on the Lakers with. So, yeah, I without you and I have talked about like how he handles situations and stuff like that. So, why do you think maybe Chris Paul wasn't the best presence for him compared to how Dame leads teams, or why do you think there might be some concerns with JJ Redick, who does lose his cool on the sideline? How do you think Ayton would handle that kind of a situation?
Well, it's just that. I mean, one of the things that I think just makes Dame such a uniquely incredible like leader and locker room presence is that he's so good at meeting people where they are. Like there are some guys that like he can do the, tough love, whatever thing with. And then there are some guys that need to be treated more with kid gloves. And, that's the way you can get the best out of them. And, he's really good at kind of figuring out who each individual teammate, and Chauncey Billups is great at this too, by the way, as a coach.
Yeah.
But like Dame is really good at like figuring out what each person's individual personality is and what the best way to get through to them is. And, the best way to build a relationship with him. And he's so versatile. And like the way that, and by the way, he's like this with us too. Like, yeah, I'm sure you've all heard all the stuff about how great of a guy Dame is and the way that he treats everybody is
totally.
The same, whether you're like one of his teammates or just like, the team, equipment manager or whatever.
Yeah. I remember Amara Baptist, right?
Oh yeah.
Social media manager. She, constantly, rants and raves about how great Dame treats people.
He's the best, and Chris Paul's a really good guy, but Chris Paul has his way of doing things. And if you don't do things his way, then, there's not a whole lot of room to negotiate there. That would be the difference. And, you obviously know JJ Redick better than I do, but he doesn't seem like he has much of a tolerance for anything that isn't like, anybody that isn't like as much of like a psycho as he is. So I'm curious how that's going to go.
Yeah, I'm really curious how that goes too. LeBron doesn't typically have too much patience on these fronts.
Oh, we've got semi-Lakers adjacent news from Shams. Frank Vogel is finalizing an agreement to join the Mavericks as a lead assistant under Jason Kidd.
Okay.
All right. Cool.
They switched places.
Switch places. Just say every team that's fired Frank Vogel has gotten worse.
I contend he's a super underrated coach. He just is terrible. Like his agent isn't very good at like steering him away from certain situations.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, the JJ thing is going to be really interesting to see because he is very rigid in his expectations. Luka has a profinity sometimes for letting a teammate know he's not exactly happy that they didn't make the right read on the pick and roll or on the timing and stuff like that. So in that regard, I think there could be some friction there. If you had to kind of wager, because this is a fork in the road moment for him, right? Mm-hmm. He went from anticipating going into the season making $35 million this year. He is now making 34 and in a completely different city, having seen the entire league not trade for him, even on an expiring contract. He arrives here with the Lakers, and it's like, all right, man. It's kind of like Dwight when he went back to the Lakers, where it's like, you can either be done and be playing in the Philippines next year, or I think he probably has more runway than that than Dwight did then.
He's only 26, so he's
But like you can either be a veteran minimum player from here on out, somebody who people just take chances on, or you can resuscitate your career, right? And I'm kind of curious if you had to kind of predict or guess on how this goes, either with the Lakers or with the rest of his career. What would you say? How do you say this plays out?
I think it's going to be probably somewhere in between those two. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
it's going to be just this like smashing success and he
Disney
now
movie.
like gets another max
It's
contract.
not going to be an episode
or,
of The Bear when they
no,
find the
it's
money in the spaghetti
no. But
sauce.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's going to be like that. But I do think that I think he knows that like, you know, his reputation is what it is, and he has, you know, this is kind of especially being on the stage that he's on with, you know, the Lakers, a team that more people watch than any other team. That like, I think he's gonna, I think he's gonna put a good face on, at least at first. And I will also say that I think he's like, for all the fact, you know, the way that like Luka and him are kind of linked because of that draft and stuff. Him and Luka are like friends. Like, they actually really like each other personally, and they also have the same agent, Bill Duffy, which I think might have had something to do with him ending up here. But I don't think it's going to be a disaster, and I also don't think it's going to be like, this is, you know, that it's kind of going to be like the way that his career has gone, where he's talented enough. Like, he's not as good as, you know, number 1 overall pick who got drafted ahead of Luka should be. But he's also, you know, I think the way that he's been characterized a lot since the Phoenix exit, and, you know, also in the last couple of days, has also been kind of unfair. I think I also think like on the center market, like out of the real like options that the Lakers have, like they didn't have enough money to go get Miles Turner. Yeah. There are guys they could have maybe traded for, like, you know, you talked about them having interest in Robert Williams, and, you know, Robert Williams is awesome when he's healthy, but he played 26 games over the last 2 years. So there's definitely some risk there. It would have been they could have traded. Like, I think the Blazers would absolutely take the package that they gave up for Mark Williams, but it would have been the exact same thing where the injury risk is there, and and there's like a reason the Lakers got cold feet about that. Rob would have been kind of the same thing, which is just, he would be really helpful and he would be a great fit. He just, you can't count on him staying healthy.
Yeah.
Ayton's been pretty durable. Like, again, he had this calf stuff, but that was, you know, about half actually being hurt and half just, you know, the team was going in a different direction, wanted to give Klingon more of a look. But I think out of the options that they had, especially, like, I think Brook Lopez would have been a good option, but once he's off the board, I think this was probably the best that they were going to do. And I think it's also a good situation for him, because playing with LeBron and playing with Luka, you know, I'm not really, I don't know about you, I'm not really buying the LeBron, you know, LeBron's going to lead. Like, I'm not really buying it. But playing with those are two guys that make everybody better that they play with. So I think it's as good of a situation for him from an on-court standpoint as it could be for anybody. I'm just a little bit concerned about, given he's such an easy target anyway, for all the reasons that it's kind of a Karl Anthony Towns thing, where he was not the reason that the Knicks lost in the playoffs, but he's the easiest guy to blame because of who he is and his personality and all that stuff. And, you know, the way people already feel about him. I'm worried that, given the way that Dwight Howard's first stint went with the Lakers and how long it took for him to rebuild kind of his career and his reputation from there, and also the way that Russell Westbrook's time with the Lakers went, and now he's kind of viewed as like a veteran minimum guy now, you know, the rest of the way. My worry is that because it happened with the Lakers, there's just going to be more attention on any of the negative stuff, because there's just more attention on that team, period. And because he's already such an easy guy to blame, because he has the reputation and kind of the pre-existing notions of him that people have, I worry that if it doesn't go well, even if he's not the reason that whatever happens with the team happens, it's going to be talked about the way that like Darvin Ham is talked about, or Dwight Howard is talked about, or Russell Westbrook is talked about, and it's just going to follow him because it happened with the Lakers.
Yeah.
That would be my worry.
Yeah. I think, we are very good at scapegoating people. Also, the Lakers have been really good at employing people who are super easy to scapegoat.
Yep.
You know, like they've put people in these tough spots, and those tough things, those tough situations haven't worked out. Before we get you out of here, Sean, I wanted to really quickly talk about some of the Lakers and Blazers talks, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I always joke on this show and with some of the people I talk to with the Lakers that Rob and Joe Cronin, they love negotiating against each other. They love to I don't think it's a stretch at all to say that the Blazers And Joe Cronin specifically is somebody who Rob talks to about as much as anybody in the league. Problem is they love negotiating a lot more than actually making the deal. And so they've talked plenty over the years, but they haven't, actually made any kind of a trade with each other. Between Robert Williams, Jeremy Grant, we just saw Anthony Simons get moved. We just saw them buy out Deandre Ayton. Do you think we're going to start seeing kind of a different stance from Joe Cronin on some of the pieces who maybe he could turn into assets, or do you think he's fine not giving stuff away at a discount, even if it means the opportunity cost down the line?
I mean, he's always kind of taken the latter approach there. I don't get the sense that they're particularly shopping Robert Williams that hard. I don't think they're completely closed off to the idea of trading him, but they like their center rotate now that DA's out of the picture. They've got Donovan Clingan and they've got Young Hansen, who, Chauncey said at Young's introductory press conference that he thinks he's ready to play right now, but he's still literally just turned 20 last week, and he's coming from a league that doesn't exactly produce a lot of NBA players. So I think I don't think they're against the idea of keeping a veteran center around. And, Rob is on the last year of his deal. He's making like $13 million. So it's not nearly as much of a financial commitment and like a guy that has to play 30 minutes a game in order to be happy as like somebody like Deandre Ayton is. So, and the other thing is I don't think the value is out there for them to trade him right now because he's, for all the reasons we've talked about, just the injury risk is what it is. You're not going to get for him what, he would be worth if he had more of a track record of being able to stay healthy. So at that point, you might as well just keep him around. The Jeremy Grant thing is a little bit interesting because I've been saying the whole offseason that needs to be their absolute number one priority is finding a way to trade Jeremy Grant, because there's no doubt that the two, and it's the same way that they kind of needed to trade Anthony Simons in order to fully give the keys to Scoot as the point guard going forward. The Blazers' two best players last year were Toumani Camara and Denny Avdia. Those two guys have to be their starting forwards. So that's a lot easier to do if you don't have Jeremy Grant in the picture. And, or that either that or you're convincing him to come off the bench. And, I don't think Jeremy really has the status or the, clout in the league to really make a stink about that. And that's also not really his personality anyway. He might just be kind of okay, fine, I get it. But I also think it's going to be pretty tough to move him with that contract. You're kind of seeing what the market has been for a guy Denver had to give up a first to get off of MPJ. I don't think the Blazers are really interested in giving up draft capital to get off of Jeremy Grant's deal. But I do think that if there was something that came along where it was neutral value and they weren't taking back a lot of long-term money, then I think that would be something at this point that would make sense. I don't the reason that they bought DA out instead of trading him is that I don't think they didn't
really want to take long-term money.
They're not interested because, if you look at their books right now, even after doing this, because Simons was an expiring deal, even after doing the Simons Holiday trade, which Drew has 2 more years after this upcoming year at pretty significant money. But they were willing to do it in that case because that was a player that they actually wanted.
Yeah. Drew seems like a Chauncey guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the other thing about it is ever since they, we talked earlier about the leadership stuff with Dame, ever since they traded Dame, they haven't had that type of presence in the locker room. And Drew is one of the few guys in the league that's on Dame's level in that regard.
Yeah.
Everywhere
unanimously beloved.
And he's also a guy that, they made it clear that they're interested, that they're not trying to tank again next year. They're interested. They want to at least, take the next step and compete for the play-in. And even though he had a little bit of a down year last year, he's not as good as he was 2 or 3 years ago. Drew Holiday is still the kind of player that you trade for when you're trying to be better this year than you were last year.
Yeah.
So that was a situation where it made sense for them to take on long-term money because it was a guy that they actually wanted and they thought would fit. I don't think when they were looking at trading Deandre Ayton, I don't think they were thinking, well, let's just take back some bad salary for next year. If we don't really care about the player, let's just do that. Because right now, even with Holiday and Grant still on their books, they're going to have about $50 million in cap space next season because the Ayton money that they bought out comes off the books because they're not stretching it. So that full 25 that they have left is coming off the books. Rob Williams is coming off the books. Matisse Thybulle is coming off the books. They're going to have about $50 million in cap space. Now, some of that they're going to have to use to give Shaden Sharp a new extension, whether they agree to that before October or wait until it goes to restricted free agency. But a decent chunk of that is going to probably end up being Shaden's new deal. But they'll still have a lot to play with. And I think they're pretty mindful of not wanting to dip into that future flexibility unless it's a situation like Drew where it's actually a player that they think is worth doing that for. So I don't think, and it might be a little bit of a different negotiation with Jeremy Grant because that's such a lot of like future money that you would be getting off of that if you're taking back some future money, but it's like a smaller salary, that might make a little bit more sense. But in general, I think they would rather not take back money beyond this season in any of these deals if they can help it.
Makes sense. That's how a lot of teams. I mean, what Lakers fans lost their minds over was the Project 2027 stuff that was making the rounds. You know, like that. That was the stuff. That
I don't know
Lakers
if calling
like,
stuff that is. I don't know if calling stuff that is a great idea, but
probably not. But yeah, like the whole like, you know, we're gonna waste not just this upcoming season, but the next one, and then in 27. Make a run at maybe Giannis. Like that was the stuff that Lakers fans were like, all right, come on.
And you can always kind of say that, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing that Miami has been selling forever, where it's like, oh yeah, we're going to go make a run at Dame. Okay, that didn't happen. Okay, we're going to make a run at Donovan Mitchell. We're going to make a run at Giannis. We're going to make a run at Kevin Durant. We're going to make a run at whoever.
They're very good at running. They aren't very good at, you know, arriving at the destination. But
yeah.
The last guy I wanted to kind of ask you about was Matisse Thybulle. You kind of mentioned him in passing.
Yeah.
Another like solid veteran who teams that want to be good like having around. Made real improvements on his shooting over the course of his career too, which makes him even more kind of interesting. I know the Lakers have been like shown some interest. I don't know about any talks about Thybulle in the same way that I know, like with Williams. I think it was even they talked about names. They didn't even get that far, I believe, with Thybulle. I think it was like, what would he cost? What's it looking like there? And that's the extent of the conversations that I have heard about. But with Thybulle, how open do you think the Blazers would be to move off of him?
I don't think they're actively looking to.
Yeah.
I think especially since they're trying to be, you know, they're not going into this season like last year they went into the season thinking they were going to be as bad as like Utah or Charlotte and try to get Cooper Flag, and then it obviously didn't happen. This year, and you saw the trade that they just made for Drew Holiday, that's a clear sign they want to at least try to make the play in next year. And
how much of that do you think is the ownership change? Like how much do you think that matters at all? Or
I think they realize at a certain point that they have too much talent to tank, even if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So I think that was a big part of it. Like, I think they also just realized that the last 3 years before this, they did the, you know, we're going to shut guys down and make up injuries and try to lose as many games as possible thing to manipulate the lottery odds. And where did that get them? And I think also another part of it, and obviously Chauncey ended up getting his extension, and so it ended up working out for him. But going into the season, everybody knew that Chauncey was going to be gone next year because he was in the last year of his contract, and everybody just kind of knew that like they were going to play out the final year of his contract and then move on. And so if you're Chauncey, why should he be interested in helping them tank and get Cooper Flag when somebody else is going to coach Cooper Flag? And then he's still going to have those losses on his resume. And then his coaching record looks like Brett Brown, who's never gotten another job again. So he wasn't really interested in helping them tank. And so it ended up going that way. But my point is that they're now going into this upcoming season wanting, you know, they would never say publicly like, oh, our goal is this many wins or we want to be a top 6 seed. I think they would view next season as a success if they're in the play-in. Like if they're competitive, if they're not, you know, one of the worst teams in the West, which could be tough because the West is, you know, kind of tough except for a team like Utah. But Thybulle is a guy that they, you know, probably doesn't have much trade value right now because he didn't play for most of the season. He had one of the worst ankle injuries that, you know, I can remember anybody having. He didn't play until like mid-March. So I don't think I think at the minimum, it's going to take, even if they do decide to shop him at some point, it's going to take until the deadline of him staying healthy for him to kind of rebuild his value to what it could be. But B, he's also just a guy that they like having around. When you talk about like a young team wanting to have good vets around,
Yeah.
he's the type of guy that is just like a guy that you like having around because he's a good guy. Everybody gets along with him. He's also from Seattle, so he's a Northwest guy. So he kind of is comfortable here. He's not like looking to move somewhere.
Yeah.
So when you say how open are they to moving him, he's obviously not untouchable because like only every team's like one or two best players are untouchable. But I don't think it's a situation like the only guy that I think is like, any remotely decent deal that doesn't tie up their books they would take is Jeremy Grant. I don't think with Thibault, I think, if they get a deal that they think makes sense for them, they'll do it. But I don't think they're losing sleep if they keep him the rest of the season.
It makes sense. I kind of looked at Portland as a team that you kind of see how the beginning of the season goes. And then depending on how the season is going, maybe they start looking to sell or something like that. But they do have a bunch of talent there. And the second half of their season last year was pretty good. Almost too good.
And it's it kind of clarifies, like they've kind of clarified some things already this offseason because they traded Simons. So now everybody knows, okay, it's going to be Scoot that's going to be running the show. And, we'll see.
Yeah.
What the Drew Holiday role ends up being if he starts with Scoot, if he comes off the bench, if he, starts with Shade and however that it goes. But getting Simons out gives the keys to Scoot for the future. So that's like clarified now. Yeah. Buying out Deandre Ayton is okay. Donovan Clingan, had a pretty good rookie season, made second team all rookie, still has a lot of work to do on the offensive end, but defensively, his impact was what they thought it was. This kid, Young Hansen, that they just drafted, who knows how long he's going to take or, what he's going to be, but he's definitely with DA out and with Rob probably not being able to play that much because of his injury history. He's going to have opportunities. The Grant thing is like the last thing that I think they need to do that's kind of keeping them in the straddling between the two different, groups of guys type of, I hate using two timelines because that's such a cliche at that point.
It's right there. It's always right there.
But he's the one guy where it's like Simons was kind of in the way of Scoot and Shaden. They dealt with that. Ayton was kind of in the way of like their young bigs. They dealt with that. Grant, if he's here, if he's starting, if he's playing real minutes, he's in the way of either Kamara or Avdia. So they got to figure that out. But other than that, like some of the other veterans that you named, like the Rob Williams, the Matisse Thybulle, those guys, I think those guys know what they are. Everybody knows what the deal is. And I don't think they're really in a rush to trade either one of them unless there's a deal that actually makes sense for them.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think that about does it on my end. We were supposed to, this is what always happens when you and I start talking. We were going to say it was like 20, 25 minutes. It became much, much longer. I'm going to hang out here a little bit longer and answer some of the super comments here. But Sean, anything that you want to plug before I let you enjoy the rest of your day?
Just go to rosegardenreport.com, sign up for a paid subscription. I'm going to be covering the Blazers throughout, that's what I cover.
It's been really good work, man.
Appreciate
like, award winning. It's like
some have said.
Been stellar. It's been so cool to watch you grow on that end of it. Yeah, there you go.
But I mean, like, this is going to be a really interesting offseason, certainly an interesting season. As I mentioned earlier, it's suddenly now literally the night of the draft, I downloaded Duolingo and I'm going to start learning the get ready to learn Chinese buddy meme. That's literally my life now. I'm actually going to try to learn a few phrases in Mandarin because I don't get this. I think Young Hansen doesn't really speak a whole lot of English. Like he has an interpreter with him. So I'm going to try to at least pick up a little bit, but like, that's going to be really interesting to kind of navigate all that. And then the other thing for those of you who might be interested in this, I'm also going to be doing a lot more coverage going forward as the launch gets closer of the WNBA expansion team that's starting up next summer in Portland, which is not off to the greatest start as far as the rollout. They haven't announced a name yet, even though I've kind of blown up their spot a little bit with what it's going to be. But like they just fired their team president who they hired 3 months ago. They still don't have a general manager. So things are going great there, but that's something that I'm going to be covering. They're playing their first season next summer. Yeah. But between those two things, that's kind of that's just where you can find me. So just go subscribe, sign up. And yeah,
Well, I'm sure I'll be talking to you over the course of the year, one way or another. And I'll probably see you in Summer League, right?
I'll be down. I'll be there. I'll be there
I'll
for the
see you in a couple
first.
weeks, and we'll have a conversation that we say is going to start with one thing, and we'll be
That's just always how it. That's always how it goes.
Sean, thank you very much for hopping on. I especially on such short notice, man. I really appreciate it. Great information, and check out rosegardenreport.com to find his work. All right. I am going to, since we've been here for going on an hour already, I'm going to go ahead and dive into your guys' super comments. Again, shouts to Sean for hopping on, man. Really, really appreciate it. I had a feeling this was where this was going to be going, and was literally writing the Lakers just signed Deandre Ayton. Now what article? Then I got stuck on the phone with somebody, not stuck on the phone. I really enjoy talking to this person on the phone, but I was on the phone for about an hour and didn't get to write that article. So instead am hopping on here to have this reaction live with you. And I was DMing with Sean and I was like, yeah, I'm getting ready to record. But if you would like to hop on in the next few days, what do you think? And he was like, oh yeah. My schedule's pretty clear. I said, well, I'm getting ready to go now. What do you think? And he's like, cool, let's do it. And that's just the kind of guy that Sean is. So shouts to Sean Highkin. Check out his stuff at rosegardenreport.com. Let's dive on in to some of your guys's or all of your guys's super comments, the ones that have stacked up already, and obviously any that come in while we are talking. But first, we got to start with this bad boy. All right. First question here comes from Let's Run with Jason Kelly. Not excited for JJ benching Ayton, no real center on the roster, and Rob spinning another PR win for a guy everyone knows just doesn't have, quote, it, end quote. I don't know. Look, sports mathematically is a mother bleeper, right? Like rooting for a basketball team, rooting for a professional team, it mathematically year in, year out, it is far more likely that season is going to end poorly than well. And when something just kind of falls in your lap, like Luka did last year, like Ayton did just now, stop and smell the roses for a second. And then, I understand I share a lot of the cynicism about these Lakers. I really do. I don't love that this was something that, the Lakers kind of rebounded with, but it also involved losing a really valuable role player and shitting on him on his way out the door. That's not great. And now it winds up being okay. And I think the Lakers are probably slightly better, if not just outright better now than they were heading into the offseason. And they certainly have a much brighter outlook moving forward with Ayton being what is he? I think he's only 25. And with Laravia being 23, they have a better outlook moving forward. Their books are cleaner than they would have been with Dorian Finney-Smith on them for 4 years moving forward. But this wasn't the plan. This wasn't some like thought out process. This wasn't like, all right, this is how this is going to go. We're going to shit on Dorian Finney-Smith. We're going to hope and pray that Deandre Ayton takes our offer and not the Indiana Pacers. Like that's not how I was hoping to cover this offseason. And obviously it turned out that way. It's nice that it did. But I like, as far as like JJ benching Ayton and all that stuff, I think that we sometimes view JJ as it pertains to the center spot through solely the prism of the really bad centers that the Lakers had on their roster last year and have had on their roster over the years outside of Anthony Davis. I think Ayton is a legitimate, he's at his best, he's definitely a legitimate starting caliber center in the NBA. At his worst, he's somebody that you never want to watch basketball or play basketball ever again. That averages out, ironically, kind of like Rob Pelinka as a GM, at like a C, at a mid-tier NBA center. and a mid-tier NBA center is already worlds better than the centers that they had on their team last year. So, yeah, I would probably say that there are plenty of reasons to be cynical about this. There are plenty of reasons to be concerned about this. But for right now, I'm going to enjoy the fact that on an open market, a market where other teams had more money to potentially offer, not saying that they definitely did offer more money and Ayton turned down more to come to the Lakers. I don't think that's necessarily true. But, with not everything absolutely perfectly lined up for the Lakers, they got their guy and they are much better for it, much better positioned for it. Next question here comes from Jason Kelly as well. Rob is playing chicken with LeBron, and no GM deserves to lose LeBron more in LBJ's career than keep his job. Rob, I hope LeBron calls his bluff. That is going to be interesting because even while the Lakers just got better today by landing Deandre Ayton, as we've talked about here before, shares an agent with Luka Doncic, Bill Duffy. And Clutch has basically, people go so far as to do the whole GM thing. I think that's a little overblown, but Clutch has gotten guys on various contracts over the years. They have, various trade targets has been something that the Clutch has worked with, right? Anthony Davis, most notably among them. Now that LeBron is looking at an organization that he has no leverage in, I do think there's a chance that he kind of looks around and says, I can't win a championship here. Or if he feels he can't win a championship here, I can't win a ring here, and I don't get to run this thing in the way that I have since I got here. Where can I go where at the very least I'll have that amount of organizational control? And that's going to be interesting to watch. I saw Brian Windhorst today on ESPN talking about how he hasn't completely opened the door to LeBron being traded, but he has unlocked it at the very least. There are certainly plenty of people who are kind of wondering how this is all going to play out. It also, by the way, wouldn't surprise me if LeBron just came back, especially if the Lakers, have a productive offseason and they look to be pretty good next year. The idea, if the point is to win a championship, I feel like you're not going to have very many better opportunities to do so than on a team with Luka. That seems like a pretty decent gig. And by the way, everywhere that you go, because you opted into your contract, everywhere that you go is going to have to give up $50 million of salary. That's going to cut into their rotation as well. So the grass might not be greener on the other side. And it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. But, if LeBron calls his bluff or whose bluff anybody's calling, we'll see how that turns out. But it is it's a major story point. It's a major kind of subplot to the Lakers trying to win a championship. And of course the Lakers have subplots. They're the Lakers. Sports fan Jack writes, hot take, but I would rather focus on a wing than another big. I get it. Specifically a 2-3 type wing, not the 3-4 type wings that the Lakers have kind of had stacked up over the years, right? Luka defends fours, LeBron defends fours, Rui defends fours. LaRavia does move his feet better than those guys do, but I still don't think you want him to be your primary wing stopper on the perimeter against like an Anthony Edwards. That seems suboptimal. So we'll see if the Wiggins trade gets picked back up. We'll see if the Lakers pick their talks back up with some of the other teams that they've been calling over the course of the summer. Maybe they call Utah and pick up the Kessler talk. Given the success that Houston had last year with two kind of bruising centers, might make sense for the Lakers to just be really big next year. We'll see. But yeah, I get wanting to focus on a wing and specifically a shooting guard / small forward type wing. That makes a lot of sense to me as well. The thing is, by way of adding Ayton the way that the Lakers added Ayton, what that does is basically make it so you don't like before they added Ayton or coming into the offseason, the thinking was they weren't going to be able to sign a starting caliber center just on the free agent market. So if they aren't going to be able to do that, and you want to land a starting caliber center, that means you had to trade for a starting caliber center. They also had to address their small forward spot because they just don't really have a natural small forward. They did go out and get Jake LaRavia, who's a little closer to that. They still, I don't think, have addressed it to the extent that they may have liked to. But now if you do go out and decide to trade for a center, you can now trade for a lower tiered center and maybe give up a little bit less, which leaves you more to go out and trade for the starting caliber two-way wing. I think that's something that is a little bit more possible now. Also, very importantly, the Lakers can, let's see, by adding Ayton and not being desperate, they can now have conversations with the rest of the league without that team being like, we know what you need to do here. The Lakers addressed the thing, at least to a certain extent. They addressed the thing that everybody knew they needed to address. They got kind of lucky in doing so, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I'm a golfer. So I would anticipate the Lakers will probably go and get a point of attack defender. There's been a lot of talk about De'Anthony Melton. Lakers like him a lot. I think they would prefer to get him on the minimum, but a lot of teams would prefer to get him on the minimum, and he probably isn't going to come over here and start. So we'll see to what extent they're able to go out and get him. They have that biannual exception now that they are going to be they're already hard capped below the first apron. So maybe they utilize that biannual exception and they bring in somebody that way. I know a lot of people would like for them to bring in Horford that way. I just think, especially now that they didn't get Ayton, Golden State is probably going to spend more than the Lakers can to bring in Ayton. But yeah, the biggest thing here is by signing Ayton this way, just via free agency, doesn't cost you anything other than, the indirect cost here is obviously Dorian Finney-Smith, which again, losing him the way that they did was not optimal. But the big thing here is signing and adding Deandre Ayton to your roster the way that they did gives you a whole bunch more optionality and therefore more leverage, which is something the Lakers have been severely lacking so far in their talks across the entire NBA when they've been trying to improve their roster. I don't want to just answer some of your guys' super comments, although I have almost what feels like a zillion comments here. So what I will say to the 9,000 of you so far who have tuned in, whether it's via Twitter bot or actually watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Help this thing grow. I know I've been catching a lot of flack the last couple of days because of reporting and stuff like that. As you guys are kind of finding out, I kind of know some stuff. I always have an incomplete picture. Always. I'm never going to have the full incomplete picture, but I'll also try to tell you that too. So, and I just like having fun talking sports here with you guys. And I feel like that's a good hang. But yeah, let's go. Let's see. Schmidt-Key Originals, Masai Ujiri, bring in Masai, essentially fire Rob. This is interesting. The way that Guggenheim operated with the Dodgers was to supplement and then replace. Now, obviously, you can't quite supplement. They never supplemented Ned Colletti with Andrew Friedman, but they brought in Andrew Friedman and then supplemented him with Farhan Zaidi, Alex Anthopoulos, And there was the other one who Eric mentioned, who I forgot. One thing if Guggenheim was already in place, I think they probably would have brought in Masai when he hit the market. And maybe that's something that, as soon as the deal goes through, whether it's in Q3 or Q4, maybe they tell Masai, hey, chill for a bit, and then we'll bring you in as a consultant, a very well-paid consultant, and they can kind of fortify the front office that way. That might be something to kind of talk about. I had written in one of my recent pieces about how one thing to look out for is for the Lakers to prep a Godfather offer for Sam Presti. I think Andrew Bogut was saying how he talked to some people in the, in NBA circles, and that's something that they are hearing as well. So, yeah, I would probably say, Masai Ujiri, and any number of former executives, just bring in brain power, bring in people who you can bring in and have conversations about basketball with a diverse background. Preferably the Lakers severely lack diversity throughout their front office. That's another thing I would like to see them address here moving forward. And yeah, I would probably, my Messiah is a good name to bring up. I would probably keep an eye out for stuff like that whenever the sale is formally finalized. Let's see. I don't know. I guess Dan Wojcicki. I'm trying to keep an eye on Twitter here as well. I saw that my report on the number of years and length of the contract, number of years and amount on it, was confirmed. I was hearing at the time of Stein's reporting that it was a 2-year deal for what was left of the Lakers mid-level exception. That appears to be the case. I believe it's a player option on the second year as well. So that's also worth noting. I believe I don't know if that's also been confirmed while we have been on the air, but yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and drop out of here now. And then I will edit this, post it onto the RSS feed as quickly as possible. Probably also record. Well, I got to write. Clutch Points is expecting me to write. So I got to write something about this, and then probably record one of those little minute-long breakdowns that I've done so far for Thiero and for Laravia. I'll do one for Ayton. So keep an eye out for that here as well. The best way to make sure you don't miss any of that, obviously, is to subscribe. So please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Thank you again to Sean Highkin for hopping on. That was awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And yeah, have a great rest of your evening. Make somebody else's. And I will talk to you whenever I talk to you, man. I do not know.